Hey everyone, my name is Caleb, and this is going to be a quick video about why you may or may not want to buy the 85mm F1.8 manual focus lens from Neewer. You can find this one on Amazon for 150 Canadian or about 110 or 120 US. And first, we're going to get into an unboxing, and then we're going to look at some photos so you can see the actual image quality. So let's take a look at what we're looking at here. So in the box, you have this stuff. So your manuals. You have a very cheap looking and feeling pouch. I guess it's packaged upside down. So if you look at it, it's packaged upside down like that. Your lens is well wrapped in plastic. No, this is not foam. This is cheap plastic, cheap packaging plastic, I guess. And this is like a Ziploc bag. And now, there you have it. This is a lens. Wow, so this has a nice weight to it. The metal, the body is all metal. That unscrews. The lens itself is cold. It feels like it's all metal. Lens cover, again, of course, is plastic. This focus ring is buttery smooth. That glass element isn't as big as you might think it would be for an 85mm. So, correction, it is not on too tight. I'm just an idiot. So I didn't even feel that it turned. It's just really weird. I guess they made it so tight. All right, and there you have it. So it has a clicked aperture ring. So let's try to get some light under. So wide. And that's it. So this is the unboxing portion. Now let's take a look at some pictures. Alright, so to start this review portion for the images, we're going to start with Pug Life. So he's on the back of the couch, the TV and the wall is about 3 or 4 feet behind him, and we're at the minimum focusing distance, the minimum focusing distance for the lens. So that should maximize the background blur and the compression in the lens, and I think it does a really good job. You can barely make out that this is a TV. For all you know, this is a picture frame. And then you're just seeing wall beside him. But I mean, the bokeh is so good that you could barely make out that this is a lamp. So this outline right here, you could kind of barely see, is actually a lamp. And despite that shallow depth of field and all that bokeh and background blur or whatever, you still seeing a lot of detail and contrast, enough that you can make out all the details in the nose and the fuzzies and all of that. So it just goes to show that even though it's a cheap lens, they did some good work on it so that you're still getting definitely acceptable images that you could work with. So we're gonna move on to this owl purse and all this all glory. And when you look at it, it's very obvious what the focus of this image is. It's the purse. I mean, everything else is blurry except the purse. And that's exactly what you're going to want this lens for, to help single out your subjects. So I think it does such a great job at that. Again, despite being such a cheap lens. And moving on to this image. Now, I accidentally shot this one in crop sensor mode. So even with that, you can't make out who this person is if you saw them on the street because their face just looks like a blob. You can kind of see a nose and eyes and hair, and that's it. But if I had gotten, so if I was in full frame mode and I had gotten as close as I actually need to get this frame, there'd be even more background blur, and you probably wouldn't make out the fit like any of the facial features for this person. And then when you zoom in, I mean, the front of the car is in sharp focus. So we're just gonna move on to the next image, and this is a turning point in the image review portion to some extent because it's starting to highlight some of the flaws of the lens. So I find this very important because a lot of times you see reviews, and if you don't really get a grasp of how bad or how good the lens is because you don't really get to see enough examples of like the chromatic aberration and how bad it is compared to other lenses. So to me, it's very important to A, highlight the flaws, and B, have a point of reference. So in the next few pictures, you're going to see the Tamron 90mm f2.8 macro lens compared to this Neewer 85mm f1.8. So you have that point of reference and you can really appreciate how good or bad this lens is. So if you look at the light here, you're starting to see some green fringing, and that's why I included this image because it is blurry otherwise. But I just wanted to show that depending on what end of the focal range you're in, you're going to get some of this green fringing or some of this purpley blue fringing. So this image is definitely more in focus, but you're seeing that you get that blue fringing. Now, I don't think this is as big a deal because for two reasons. This lens actually does really good with fringing and chromatic aberration, and you're going to see that really soon in the next few images. But even if you had a lot of that in images, it's really easy to get rid of it. And I'd want you to just take a look at this image on my Instagram where I edited it, and you wouldn't even be able to tell that it had any fringing at all. So check that out when you get a chance after you finish this video. So I'm gonna move on to the next image. This is starting to compare the lens so that you can see the flaws and maybe some of the strengths of the lens compared to another lens. So this first image is a Neewer wide open, and you can see how good the bokeh is. Like, this is supposed to be a sign that says gamer at work, and you can't even tell there's words on there. So it's completely blurred out. And then when you zoom in on the subject of the image, which is this blue ball here, this blue Christmas tree decoration. Don't worry about my Christmas trees up in March. But yeah, you can see that it's acceptably sharp. And I mean, once again, this isn't that big of a deal because it's very easy to add sharpening in post-production. Another notable thing is that blue color fringing that I was talking about. But when you compare it to a more expensive lens, I mean, the blue color fringing is actually worse on this more expensive lens, but this more expensive lens is sharper, notably sharper. It's also definitely more contrasty, and those things jump out at you right away. Now, you will notice there's less background blur, however. It is a f2.8 lens. So a few things worth noting. And now you're going to be wondering, well, why am I comparing these two lenses? Well, two reasons. I want you to have that point of reference. This is the type of image with the same approximate distance that you would get with this lens, which is somewhat similar to the Neewer 85mm f1.8. And this lens you could actually get for cheap, either used locally or maybe on eBay. Right, the Tamron lens is what I'm talking about there. So it is in a sense a competitor to this lens. The difference in background blur it's notable, but I mean, I could definitely see a few people being willing to give up that little bit of extra bokeh to get a sharper image, right? That said, I think this comparison really highlights that even wide open, the Neewer lens does really good with chromatic aberration and color fringing, right? And I think you're going to see even more now in this next image. So this is the Neewer wide open. This is actually the Tamron lens at f4. The reason it's at f4 is because it's a macro lens. Once you get close enough, the macro lenses move away from their f2.8 aperture and they start stopping down. And I'm not going to get into the technical reasons as to why that happens, but it does happen. And that's why I said f.4 right now. So to have a more fair comparison, I did put the Neewer lens at f4 as well. And two things you're going to notice. The background blur is less on the Neewer at f4, which is kind of strange, but it's still there nonetheless. So definitely you're going to want to shoot this lens at f1.8 because it's nowhere near the amount of background blur you're getting with, let's say, this 90mm f2.8, and that's for a number of reasons. Even at f4, because you're running into the macro range, there's more compression in the background, so you're going to see you're getting more background blur. But with the Neewer, you have almost no chromatic aberration. You have to really zoom really far in to see it. It's practically non-existent, which is amazing if you ask me, because it's a cheap manual focus lens. Whereas this more expensive autofocus macro lens has a whole bunch of blue color fringing. So and then also it's significantly sharper than the first image. So when you zoom into the first one, you can barely tell the details in the top of this decoration. When you zoom in here, everything's nice and sharp, and it looks fairly similar to the Tamron lens. Now you're still gonna, another thing I can point out is that this Neewer lens here is still a little bit less contrasty as well than the Tamron. I think that's going to be highlighted a little bit better, but also how sharp the Neewer lens is going to be highlighted a little bit better in the next couple images. So this is the Neewer lens now at f4. So I had to just take one more set of images so that you can really appreciate how well the lens performs compared to other lenses with the same settings. And this is going to highlight how sharp the Neewer lens is. So if you look at the two images zoomed out like this, first thing that's going to jump out to you is the Tamron appears more contrasty and sharper. But only one of them is true. It's definitely more contrasty when you, at first glance, but the sharpness, I would argue, is about the same at f4. So when you look at the Tamron lens zoomed in like this, great sharpness. When you look at the Neewer lens zoomed in like this, the sharpness is legit about the same. And again, to me, that's amazing because this is a really cheap lens. And what's also amazing to me is the fact that there's no color fringing. This is, again, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, all of my lenses have some amount of color fringing like this, even when you stop down. And this cheap Neewer lens is doing such a good job of having none. Just stop down to just f4. So that's really, really, really good. And yeah, so I mean, to me, that wraps up all the things that you really need to know about the image quality from this lens. I would say for the price, it's amazing.
So my recommendation is, it is definitely worth the money. But if it is, you, for whatever reason, require the sharpest images, you might want to look into another lens, especially if you want the sharpest images wide open, because wide open, as you can see, this lens is a little bit soft. There's some chromatic aberration. But what I would say is, once you stop down to even what is probably around f2.0, you start seeing improvement in the contrast in the middle of the frame. You start seeing improvement in the sharpness in the middle of the frame. So what I find myself doing is shooting with it not fully wide open, but at that f2 range, so in between f2.5 and f1.8. So you get sharper images, and you get more contrast in the images, but you still keep pretty much all of the bokeh. So it's a small trade-off, and I know you're buying the lens to shoot it wide open at f1.8, but if you want a little bit better image quality, you're not gonna even notice a difference in that bokeh. That said, sorry, you're gonna find that you could purchase like the Canon 85 f1.8, which I've only heard is a lot sharper. Then you're also gonna have the autofocus. You could find that you can purchase that off of eBay. Whoops, alarm. You can purchase that off of eBay for about $300 Canadian, or even off one of our used buying and selling websites, Kijiji. So only for double the price. So for double the price, you might be able to find sharper lens. I've actually seen comparisons online where it actually has more chromatic aberration. So I can't comment on that one officially, but you're gonna definitely get a sharper lens. You're also gonna get autofocus. So is autofocus worth double the price to you? Only you could answer that one. If you could deal with the manual focus though, so if you're not shooting action, then this lens is definitely worth the money. And that's it. Take it easy. I'll see you all with another review.